Good morning, everyone. Thank you to our final meeting for the Management Committee this year. We have apologies from Councillor Goldfam Asif. We knew he wouldn't be able to get here today. This is an extra meeting. We also have apologies from Councillor Carl Burke, who's had something urgent come up at the last minute, which is unfortunate. So for the benefit of those listening on the webcast, I am Councillor Judy Stewart-Turner and Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And can everybody else introduce themselves so that people can follow us easily, please?
I'm Councillor Rob Walker. I'm the lead member for the Economy and Neighbourhoods panel.
Councillor Liz Smage, lead member for Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny panel.
And then on my left, Penny.
Penny Bunker, Governance Support to the Committee.
We have a few guests here today. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves when it's their turn to speak, so hopefully everybody can follow what we're doing. We have item 1 of our agenda is minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy to set these minutes? Well, we've got two. Let's go take them one at a time. Minutes of the 26th of February. Are we happy to accept those as a true record? Yep, move those. That's fine. Minutes of the 12th of March. Are we happy to accept those? Yep. Panel members agree to that. That's great. Item 2 on the agenda is interest. Do councillors have any interest to declare? No, none. And admission of the public is item 3, which is this is all a public meeting, and they're very welcome to join us. We value their input. It's nice. So item 4 on our agenda is inclusion and diversity strategy. We have guests here to speak to us about this, so if you'd like to introduce yourselves, and I'll hand over to you, Dave.
David Burnley, Corporate Policy Officer.
Agnieszka Woolstrup, Policy.
Naz Parker, Director of Housing and Residential Growth, but also the Director Champion for Inclusion and Diversity.
Thank you, Chair. Shibri Pando, I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council. With your permission, I'm going to quickly introduce it. I've not got the detailed knowledge of our office, I've got the detailed knowledge, that's why I've got them here. Very, very quick, Chair. Members will know that we adopted the Action Plan for Inclusion and Diversity in full Council in September 2017. The key focus for today really is to actually focus minds on where we are at within the Action Plan. And one of the things I hope members will ask us to do and support is to actually come back and refresh an update of the Action Plan with a view to taking that to full Council sometime in the next municipal year. The key focus for today is to actually focus on our employees. We have a number of employee networks which have been going on for a number of years. And actually it's quite startling that some of them have been going on for 15 years. And one of the questions that I asked was, what have we achieved? Because I myself was an employee within the council many years ago, before I decided to actually come onto the side of the council. I'm a member. And one of the things that I felt at that time was I was part of the BME network. And although the commitment was there from senior managers, I felt that I couldn't really speak up because, you think, oh God, if I put my head over the parapet, I might get shot and, all these things. And I'm assuming the same thing is for the Women's Network, the LGBT Network, the Disability Network, the Working Carers Network, and the Disabled Network. More recently, from my own experience, working across the public sector in other organisations and NHS, the Working Carers Network, I think, has got a critical part to play because as we have an elderly growing population and people get more mobile within the workforce, especially young people, and as we see the pressures mount on adult social care and children's services, then more and more people tend to actually become working carers. And, from anecdotal evidence from what I've seen, people who are looking after elderly parents or some disabled person within the family, they find it very difficult to actually take that time off or get the managers to understand their needs. So I think there's a lot of work to do around there. With the other networks, I think we probably know amongst ourselves what the issues are. but how far have we actually gone to tackle them issues? We've got some statistics in front of us, but we can talk about statistics, till cows come home. We just got to go around our organisation and see where the gaps are. And although we have moved on a long, long way, there's still a long way to go. So, without further ado, what I'll do is I'll ask members to take questions, and if there's any detailed questions that come up, Chair, with your permission, I'll ask Naz and David to fill the questions. But one of the priorities that I think we need to focus on is where we actually see a startling gap in our workforce, where people are within the organisation. We need to actually start stepping up our mark in terms of addressing the issues, so actually we do become inclusive within the community that we represent. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I was actually going to ask about the networks and how they're supported and how employees able to attend network meetings okay. But it is concerning that you say that you don't believe the carers network is well supported. So what are you doing to change that then?
I'll take that. So just on the broader point of the networks, since the launch of the action plan, we had a real commitment to reinvigorate those networks and kind of get them feeling like they are supported, but also being more real with that and sort of agreeing some real actions that add value to the strategic priorities of the council and in aligning those to the outcomes-focused journey that we're on. So and David and I have just come from a network chairs meeting where we have discussed some of those issues, Councillor, that you're raising around. Is there that permission in the organisation? Is that time being set aside and enabling those? Our managers supporting that as well as the kind of the senior commitment that there is in the organisation. I guess whilst we have made some strides, particularly around the Young Employees Network, who held a very successful conference that was supported by the organisation only last week, where they had 100 employees, and the chair of the network was talking about how the positivity, normally they would get about 20 to 30 people attending this, so to get 100 was surpassed all their expectations. And some of the achievements that are coming out of that are very laudable, and David can update you on some of those in a minute if you so wish. But I think, if I'm being honest, the answer to the question, are they being released? It's patchy. It's always dependent on who your manager is and how committed she or he is to the inclusion and diversity agenda. So there's something I think that we need to do to kind of, in terms of reinvigorating those networks and the value that they can add to the organisation's work, not just on this agenda but across the piece, is something that we're now working on. We're just working on a communication as we speak, quite frankly. Is that a note to go out from Jackie to advise managers that this is something that is important, that we're passionate about, and that we want to legitimise the time that the network spend on trying to add value to the organisation. I think it's a journey. I think it will continue to be patchy until we fully embed inclusion and diversity within the culture of the organisation, that it becomes a part of everyday working life as opposed to something that is an add-on. And I think that's still quite challenging.
Just follow that up then with how you going to ensure that people feel that the networks are for them. I mean, for instance, for carers, you mentioned carers. People can be a carer, but they're not recognised formally in any sort of system as being a carer. But actually the network could be supportive for them. So how are you going to make these networks inclusive for everybody and make people feel that they can be part of them, even if they're not, if you're not you're in what's called an informal carer, a carer. If you're caring for somebody, then you're a carer, aren't you? I mean, Absolutely. Yeah.
No question. So we're working with the Carers Network to look at two things. More broadly, for the organisation as a whole, is a Carers Charter, but more specifically with those carers who work for the council, a carer's passport. So to formalise that with their managers, it's not dissimilar to the passport we did around disabled employees. To essentially say, because if you move around the council, do you want to have to go through that conversation all over again? So essentially that there is a formal recognition that you're a carer, you have caring duties, so therefore the organisation and managers have to be flexible around some of those needs. It actually supports what the Deputy Leader was saying, is in terms of the journey we're on in terms of adult social care transformation and the work we're doing around carers there. It fits exactly in the same space, so why wouldn't we recognise that and make provision for that? We just need to finalise the detail with the carers network that the passport items that we're putting in fit their needs and are relevant to their circumstances, and then we're able to launch that through the necessary approval processes.
I think Liz raised a very important question and important issue. Do we have statistics on working carers? I don't think we do. Do we have statistics on men, women, disabled people, BME people? Yes, we do. So in terms of the spectrum of where we are at with a particular group, it's very mixed. And the reason why it's mixed is because there are certain things we have to do on a statutory basis under the public sector equality duty. But again, right, yeah, what we want to move away from, and this is one of the things we're going to drive, is just about that quantifying and number crunching to how we actually develop that quality information and quality feedback. So one of the things that what I want to ask the members to support me on and the council is how do we actually go away from that number crunching to actually feel make our employees and our networks feel that they have the confidence and they have the assurance that we are behind them. And the only way to do that is about hearts and minds. And it is a slow journey, but I really want to actually step that up quite drastically. So hopefully next 6 months to a year's time, we can actually come back and say that we've actually had qualitative information, and this is what our care networks, our individual employees are feeling. This is how our other groups of people are feeling. Because to actually get inside somebody's mind and somebody's sort of how they feel is very important. And we've all worked in different professions and different sectors. And when you talk to people, they actually open up and they actually talk about, well, I've got a mother, I've got a dad, I've got a disabled person, and all the problems they face. And I'm sure it's the same goes with other staff. So we need to actually up the game. We need to actually work with our partners within Kirklees. We also need to talk to our other local authority partners within West Yorkshire. And we can't do this in isolation, but at the same time, we can actually set the pace.
Very much linking in with what you've just been talking about, Shamir, in terms of the hearts and minds, engaging people with this. What would you say have been some of the major outcomes, major changes that have resulted from the work of some of the networks? And how have we actually publicised those? Because I think one of the key ways of getting people on board with this is to demonstrate to them that the networks do make a difference. So could you give some examples of changes that have happened, and then how has that been?
So it's a really good question, and it's one of those things that I think has emerged as a challenge since the action plan has been launched, is some of the actions, if you go through the action plan and ask ourselves the question, if this activity comes to pass and you complete it, what impact is it actually making? What are the outcomes that we're achieving? And I think this is why the Deputy Leader is seeking support for a refresh of the plan, is that some of those actions are internally focused and very process-driven, and when we first started out on this journey, we took a temperature check of the organisation and recognised that there's quite a way for us to come on this in terms of the cultural shift. So we became intentionally inwardly focused, gathering the intelligence and the data. But gathering intelligence and data does not necessarily translate into outcomes. It tells us something. And actually what some of the data is telling us is that perhaps some of the actions need to be tweaked to become much more outcomes focused. But on your point itself of what are the achievements, so we've seen great success in outcomes around the Young Employee Network. In part, that's because the Young Employee Network has quite a huge amount of energy and effort and passion and commitment. They've got that, through that energy and enthusiasm, they've pushed at doors that are actually open, but managed to get support from managers as well as senior folk as well as politicians. And then say the conference, for instance, or being involved in the transformation agenda, so there are 5 discrete projects in adults that young employees grabbed and said, we can plan for this project, we can work on this project. As a result of that, some of those young employees have secured roles within the Transformation Directorate itself. The work we're now doing with the BME network, for instance, so I attended the BME network to essentially give that messaging around hearts and minds that this is a part of everyday work, it shouldn't be an add-on, managers should see it as that, the organisational permission is there. There is still a thing about confidence within the organisation to do that, stepping up and putting their heads above the parapet. But we've now invited the BME network to present their work plan and their ideas for change to the next council managers group. So they're now preparing that work plan. I've already talked about the carers passport. We've delivered on the disabled employees passport as well. So there have been some tangible outcomes. I wouldn't claim that we have got to the end point yet, but certainly are putting some of those actions in place. And I think if we then refresh, one of the other challenges that came back to us both from the networks and from the political scrutiny that we get on this is, are you looking at this from the right end of the telescope? And so I said we were internally focused because we recognised there was some change that we had to make within the organisation itself. But actually, maybe now is the time to flip that and say, are we looking at this from our community's perspective? Kirklees is a very diverse place. We should celebrate that as a strength. And when I say diverse, I mean in the broadest sense. No one town or village is the same. And are we understanding what the DNA of each of those communities is? So if we want to, as a committed and diverse workforce, is one of the top actions in the action plan, if we want to truly reflect our communities, that there is that confidence and assurance within the communities itself, that the council will be able to understand what the needs of that particular community are. The diversity action plan needs to start thinking about how we engage communities as well.
So the second part of my question really was about the communication of the change that's happened. How successful do you think that is at the moment? Where things have been looked at, changes have been made, is there more that needs to be done in terms of the kind of feedback loop to staff?
Absolutely. So in terms of the overall engagement within the organisation, David has been instrumental as the policy officer with the responsibility around inclusion and diversity. He has been to executive team, following the full council approval, to then get in that senior support, help people understand the actions and how they need to be delivered. He's also been to each individual senior leadership team in each of the directorates to kind of air the action plan, help people to understand and think about their diversity issues. We have something called a management planning forum where all the service directors, strategic directors meet to discuss some of the prevalent issues in the organisation. He's been able to take it to that as well. As a result of that level of engagement at the very senior level of the organisation, we've created an inclusion and diversity hub, which has identified champions in services who will help work through the action plan in terms of delivery. Is there more to do? Absolutely there is. I think what we recognise is one of the barriers to change is getting further down to the managerial level, where we have managers who work with frontline staff, because it's the frontline staff who will help us reshape the organisation, and winning the hearts and minds of those managers and that layer of frontline staff I think has to be critical. And whether that comms cascade has reached that point, I would say is very, very patchy.
Yeah, sort of. You set me up well for my second question, really, which is, Kirklees is a large and very complex organisation. With the work that's been undertaken, is that picking up where there might be differences in organisational culture between different sections of the council and its operations? And if we are picking up on those, what are we doing about it to try and ensure that it's all parts of the organisation are really buying into the work that we're trying to do?
I guess this is about our people strategy in large part. So we now have a new head of people services who is working through that people strategy. Inclusion and diversity is a very key theme within that people strategy. So in terms of the learning and development piece in the organisation, building in kind of learning and development sessions around inclusion and diversity as a specific is writ large there. In terms of getting that buy-in, and is it, have we identified areas? Anecdotally, we have, and then of course there's those conversations either with the strategic directors in those bits of the business or further down. Now that we've established the Inclusion and Diversity Hub and we have people from services who are engaged with this agenda, we're beginning to get a bit more evidence and feedback. But I don't think there's any one bit of the organisation I would say is an exemplar or a bad practice. It really does home in on winning the hearts and minds of individual managers on some of this. And so what are we doing? So I referred to Jackie's communication that's about to go out next week. I talked about our communities in Kirklees, and you've talked about the complexity of Kirklees as an organisation and being very diverse. One of the things that we've identified is that many organisations have a diversity calendar. So the reason Jackie's sending something out next week is because it's Diversity Matters Awareness Week. So we're going to use that to kind of continue to make the message about how important this is and how it's a part of everybody's responsibility to get on board. Now, we know that a kind of a comms that goes out on the intranet isn't enough on its own, so we then need to then keep making sure that those managers through the Inclusion and Diversity Hub are picking those things up, and then we get that two-way feed so that we know where we might need to focus more attention.
Okay, Shabir wants to just add to this, and then Liz has got a question.
Yeah, very quick to share. The issue about cultures and how people feel is very, very complex. In my mind, the way I want to approach this is very clear. One is, how do we actually, from a quantitative point of view, make sure that the figures actually are representative of what we're trying to achieve in terms of representation across all the different groups. But just by doing that, I don't think we'll get where we want to get. Because within that, there's so many different complexities within organisations, within our communities. We've all heard about the unconscious biasness, about how people don't even know how their behaviour affects other people. So there's all these complexities that come in. So the approach has got to be a strategic approach where you've got different strands that actually make up the complete whole. And the bottom line for me is, if an individual member of staff wants to be wherever he or she wants to be in the organisation, as long as that person feels that they're being valued, their well-being is looked after, and they come and do the best job they can to make sure that the organisation's aims and objectives are met, yeah, that is where we want to be. But within that, if you actually go and talk to individuals, no matter where they are in the organisation or what particular group, they will have personal issues. So what we want to do, we want to actually become an employer who actually cares and genuinely actually understands how we can actually bring our staff along. Now, that's not to say that, we can do everything, but at the end of the day, we've got to provide a service and we've got to do a business. But at the same time, individuals do matter, and we want this place to be an organisation where people want to come and work, not people where they just come and work and, we've got a 9-to-5 job and let's go home and that's it, and then pour their heart out to friends and family. We want employees to go away and actually get them positive messages out. The other way to actually become sort of like focused on our performance is to actually go and talk to these employee networks, or maybe in future to actually bring a representative of the employee network. So rather than hearing it from myself or Naz or Dave, we actually have representatives of them networks to come and give evidence themselves. And so you hear it from the horse's mouth, sort of speaking. And it's really important that not just members in this council chamber, but also across the council actually understand what we're trying to do. It's like steering a ship, but I want to try and make sure that we actually get there.
Actually, one of my questions was about how you go. This seems to be about quite a lot about collecting data, and how you were then actually going to put some actions in and make some progress. I think we need to have a feeling for that, because this seems very much about collecting information and not about actually doing very much. And I just wanted to ask as well about the employee survey, how what sort of areas that's covering, because I understand it's to be issued this month. Country report, and how it's going to help you move forward with your aims and objectives. But I also wanted to ask about champions, because you mentioned champions, and we seem to appoint champions, but then what support do those champions get, and where does the work of champions then feed into to this overall strategy as well?
Really good challenge on the action plan, Councillor Smash, and that was the point that I think we've been challenged on by other politicians on, is that, okay, this is an action plan, you're collecting data, well, what difference does that make? And I think when we, as officers, if we challenge ourselves, we have to admit that actually what that does is it helps us understand where we need to make the difference, much more so than actually making the difference itself. And so some of the data and intelligence we have been gathering as a result of some of the actions that we've identified is telling us a story that there is underrepresentation in 3 key areas, and that is young employees. We have an ageing workforce. 60% of our workforce is 45 and above, so we need to do some succession planning. As some of us might say, that's not so old. And I would agree, I have to confess. But it does tell us about something about workforce planning. It takes us back to the people strategy where that workforce planning is happening. So very recently we just launched a learning program for aspiring managers. Because the data is telling us that we have underrepresentation amongst young employees, amongst BME employees, and there's a severe underrepresentation amongst BME employees in managerial roles. So we've focused in on, and similarly with disabled employees, so we asked managers to identify people from those groups as a priority, not exclusively, but as a priority, so that we could start developing the next cohort of leaders in the organisation. Do remind me of your second half of your question. The champions. So the Inclusion and Diversity Hub is made up of those champions. I meet with them regularly on a 4 to 6 weekly cycle to offer the support, to give the strategic input into some of the work that we're doing. We're working with senior leadership teams in each of the directorates to ensure that those champions and the work that they do around this is recognised and valued. It's a very early on in this process, so the first meeting of the Inclusion and Diversity Hub happened in January as a result of the nominations that came through from the services. We now are working with those champions to plan for National Inclusion Week, which is in September, and you might think, well, that's quite far away, but actually with the summer break it probably won't be. So we're now planning those activities in terms of what National Inclusion Week should look like for the Council, and we would really welcome your input and your support into that as well. So those are the kinds of things that are currently happening. We recognise that we need to do more, and so just having come out of the network chairs meeting for the just earlier on today, one of the ideas they're coming up with is that, well, actually we should engage the communities in some of that and connect with some of the things that are already happening in our communities around National Inclusion Week, and maybe what we need to do is just identify a handful of people who can actually kind of really focus in on and give that some sort of concentrated attention.
Yeah.
Right. Here's a couple of points to. I think you mentioned the employee survey, Council, as well. Yeah. So this year, as with 2 years ago, there'll be specific questions in there about called including us all, and the people will be asked about: do you feel you're included in your team? Do you feel your workplace is welcoming a lot of people from different backgrounds? So that gives us a benchmark in the employer survey. We can look back at the previous one and see whether we've made progress against that. Yeah? To see whether we are including people in the workforce, so people are valued, yeah, and picking up Councillor Handl's point about the people who are able to come forward with their issues. So the employer survey will provide information on that. And I would like to echo the point about, yes, the first 6 months has been about a data-driven strategy, yeah? That will change, yeah? But it has led to, I think, another example that we are progressing along the people's strategy is that services do need a baseline of data to work from to recruit. So we talk about an inclusivity gap. So when you're recruiting, for example, you need to know where the gaps are in your workforce. So there'll be a toolkit available to service managers and service teams to look at that data. So when they recruit a more creatively, and the impact will be to reach out to communities in a more engaging and creative way. And eventually we'd like to involve the network in that as champions in the community to demonstrate how it can work. So we encourage more applicants from a diverse range of communities coming forward.
Did you have another?
A follow-up on the champions, actually. I can remember we had a large discussion about mental health and an action plan and a mental health champion from an officer perspective as well as a council perspective. And I just wondered how that mental health action plan and mental health champion is feeding into all of this as well. Where is that work on the health, on the health side?
Yeah, Councillor, it's a very good point. Obviously, mental health has been one of the areas where we probably haven't given enough attention to over the years. We are plugged into, as part of the network chairs, our wellbeing chair, yeah, who picks up that whole angle for our employees, and they are actually inputting into that action plan, and they are coordinating a number of events over the coming year to actually raise awareness amongst managers across the organisation to make sure this is given its rightful priority, and to make sure we are putting in support the appropriate measures for people going through a mental health experience. I do think part of that is, it comes back to also the performance angle in the dialogue that managers have with their employees and the culture that we create in the organisation so that people feel they are able to come forward with those issues and feel supported. So, yeah, that action plan is being taken forward and we are plugged into it and we'll support that implementation. Sorry.
So I've referenced the people strategy a number of times now. So the people strategy is going to be instrumental in helping us change some of both the culture of the organisation, but some of the outcomes that we want to try and achieve. So well-being is a really, really key part of that. And then on David's point around recruitment, we're now looking very clearly at how we go out and recruit people, and are we doing it? Are we just being process driven, or are we actually outcomes focused? And against some of those underrepresentations, how are we targeting people from those communities? Just simple things like, do we advertise in the right places? And do we use the means by which some of those communities might want to be engaged? So do we go around to community groups in any way to say, there's a part of the jobs that are about to come out, you might be interested in these. The BME network have said to us, why don't we use them to go into schools? So those people who work in frontline roles, such as the trades in terms of plumbing or heating engineering or being a carpenter or whatever, a plumber, why don't they go into schools, for instance, and start promoting that type of work and how you can build a profession in that line of work, etc., and the apprenticeships that we have. So we are beginning to use the people strategy work to really try and home in on how we make impact in this area. I mean, if I were to give you a startling statistic around what the data is actually telling us, so whilst I get that the data collection exercise is an end in itself, it is telling us something that will help us focus and prioritise. So when we look at the representation of BME staff in the layers of the organisation, we have 969 employees, of which 724 are in grade 8 and below. And in senior management, we have 1. I think that might be me. Yes, of course.
There's a couple of areas I want to explore. Good and bad. Well, it's not bad really, but it's constructive. But you talked about the people strategy, and I think that might be useful to send that to us and see if we can input into that. That'd be interesting to see that people strategy. But on the employee stuff, you did go through, read the statistics that were included in the report, and I would love, ideally, to see an authority that reflected the population of Kirklees, people we represent. That would be the ideal. But in some of the senior posts, we are not getting enough applicants for the posts. We are struggling to find the people with the skills from any background to fill some of the posts. So as part of that people strategy, do you have any practical measures in place to develop some of those skills, to fill some of those gaps?
I would say we're now beginning to build that into the people strategy. So the data collection exercise has homed in on and helped us understand where the issues are. And so when I was talking about some of our recruitment ways that we recruit to address the issue around getting applicants, it's not as simple as or as tokenistic as I would go out and say, as saying we welcome applications from. We're an equal opportunities employer. What we should be is an equal outcomes employer, and so that's why we need to extend our reach in how we actually drum up the interest in working for the council as a whole. And some of that will, taking up Councillor Pandor's point, will come from building that confidence. So the people strategy is saying we should not shy away from understanding the fact that we have certain layers that are underrepresented by certain protected characteristics. So, in terms of we should celebrate the fact that in terms of women, we have a significant representation of women in. Indeed, at the senior levels of the organisation, and that's something for us to celebrate and not grow complacent around, but actually celebrate that because it does add value.
Yeah, I have one quick point. Yes, you're right. That's why we've embarked on this pilot of actually targeting the Horizon Leadership Programme around BME and disability. Yes, that's about growing our future leaders. Yes, that's right. There is an issue about applicants, but it's also about growing people from within the organisation as well, and that will be expanded in the future. So hopefully that will come through in the coming years.
I think there's something about the confidence of the organisation to say we will have a disabled employees leadership programme, because to kind of, I think there's a confidence issue around, well, what would we do with the challenge about why them? And similarly with the, you know, a BME leaders program, if that's what we wanted to launch, it would be why them, why not me? And that's why the data has become important in that, because the data tells us something.
And it is a difficult balance to get the right people with the right skills to do the job as well, at the same time. You wanted to contribute to this, Rob? Yeah.
I was just going to say that I thought the section here on the leadership and management programme is a very positive move. I would applaud that. One thing I would like to ask is it envisaged that it will go beyond level 3? So people who may do the kind of team leader supervisor type course, do we see them moving beyond that onto level 4 and 5 so they can really move up the organisation and start to take on more senior posts? Is that something that's foreseen in the future?
Yeah, I certainly would support something like that, and because yes, the answer to that is, but it's actually more than that. It's also, once we actually train these employee staff up, what do we do to retain them? So recruitment and retention is also quite an important thing, and again, we need to actually focus on that in terms of once we actually start to grow our own, we want to make sure that they stay here.
Two more quickies, well, hopefully. There's reference in here to an outward-facing Year 2 action plan. Is that available for us to have a look at?
Sorry, Chair, maybe the way it's written in that this is Year 1 of the plan, so we will refresh the plan for the next 6 months. So Year 2 will be far more outward-facing in terms of our communities. Yeah, so that's not there, but that work is yet to be done. Yeah.
If we can do a bit of pre-scrutiny work and have some constructive input into that, that would be helpful. Yeah. Okay. The other point is you mentioned the National Inclusion Week. Is that an opportunity to involve some of our partners and to explore how they're progressing inclusion and diversity?
Absolutely is, and David's right. You know, we have been internally focused. You know, our intention is to now become outwardly focused. That's why National Inclusion Week becomes a launch pad to showing that Kirklees means business and is actually committed and passionate about this agenda. So, the point that I was talking about in terms of seeing this from our community's perspectives is to engage and connect with the things that they are going to be doing in National Inclusion Week, rather than just the council saying, here's what we're doing. It's to sort of be the council being in the communities, being part of National Inclusion Week with our partners and with our communities. So we would really welcome anything that, you know, your reach into communities is greater than some officers. So whatever is going on in the communities, we would love to know about, so that we can approach those community groups to say, how can we help, or how can we work together on this? We'll send you the date. I think it starts around the 19th of September, but we'll firm that up for you.
Okay, the date, but also what plans you have to promote it? Is it going out with sector leaders, volunteering Kirklees? Is there what avenues are you using to promote it, to gather that intelligence?
Can I make a confession? We only started planning on Thursday. That's a really important point in terms of the reach out into our partners. Thank you.
I had just a quick question about we're looking at recruitment, but what about retention and the actual physical environment that's suitable for everybody, that's inclusive for everybody? Because sometimes it can be very difficult to move around our buildings, never mind anything else. And so how are you making it so that if people are employed, that everybody's needs are met, so that the environment that everybody works in is inclusive for all?
Councillor Smage, given the experience we've just had this morning. Clearly, as a public sector equality duty, we have to ensure, access. As a public body, we have to make sure that all our buildings are accessible. All our buildings, certainly in getting through the front door, are accessible. We do have a lot of very old, historic buildings that were designed for a different purpose at a different time. So some of the challenges of making the entire environment accessible can be quite problematic, particularly in chambers like this, for instance. But that's not to say we shouldn't think through. So now I've clocked today that David's a wheelchair user and really wasn't able to get to this side of the chamber without trying to manoeuvre around a number of obstacles. Part of the accommodation strategy obviously has that in view, and we are moving much more toward, as you'll have seen yourselves, an open plan environment, so that there aren't those obstacles and things. And in terms of health and safety, we're also cognizant of those issues. But again, I wouldn't say we've completely cracked that. You know, if I was a potential applicant, and I was a wheelchair user, I may not have said what I've just said. And to be honest with you, it probably is some input from David at this point.
Before David comes in, and he can fill the detail in, we have a reasonable adjustment guide for managers. So managers actually are fully briefed in terms of what they can do and what they should do for employees who have certain needs. And we've gone beyond that. What we've also got is a reasonable adjustment passport. So that chain goes with them. But obviously, we've just seen this morning that changes that we need in terms of our buildings that are accessible to all employees. Right? Yeah, it's quite challenging, but I'm sure Dave will provide a bit more detail around that.
I think you covered the main points there, Councillor Sanders. Just to be clear, on the passport, as stated, if you have a reasonable adjustment, that goes with you to the change job or move accommodation. A slightly different quick, but I've now moved about 10 times in my time in the council. So my mission is to make every building accessible that I go to. So we've just moved recently, and we're getting electric doors put in today. So it is an issue. I think also what might happen at the moment, we're having a new way of working, and it's a bit jargonistic, called mobile agile. Yeah, I think technology will help part of this. Yeah, that's not to say that all buildings should not be accessible. Where there is a historical, insurmountable issue, yeah, we now have the equipment where people can work from different locations, yeah, where that are accessible. So there is a workaround quite often, yeah, but there is quite a way to go.
I think also my question is not just about physically getting in and out of buildings, but actually where you actually working. A lot of there are some people who need a certain working environment to help them in the work, and I'm just wondering, is it going to be as inclusive as we possibly can?
Yeah, issues of lighting, seating, just lots of different things. Yeah, it's mental. Yeah.
Clearly there is a commitment to doing so within the constraints of certain buildings. And you know, in terms of the reasonable adjustment piece that Councillor Pandor was just referring to, I think that kind of looks at individuals and individuals' working area as a desk more so than the entire environment. So I think David's point about looking at the entire environment, your point, Councillor Smage, about the entire environment is something that we will continue to address. Yeah.
Okay, final point, because we do need to move on to the next item, but finally, don't want to come across as negative, because I like what's happening so far. I think it's great that we've got this commitment, that we've done all this, got this baseline to build on, and there's so much commitment from across the council to make it happen. So that's all good. We just want Scrutiny would like to help to drive it forward to do more. So in that light, I think it would be nice to timetable for you to come back in the new municipal year to bring details on the National Inclusion Week, to bring the outline of the Year 2 action plan, and bring us a copy of the People Strategy to see if we can add value to those different directions of travel. Is that okay? Yeah. Is that all right? Is that all right, everyone? Panel members? Yeah? Fine. Okay, if you liaise with Penny on the most suitable date, is that right, Rob? Yeah? Okay. We better move on to the next item. Yes, right. Yeah.
Really, your comment about people say with autism and including them in the workforce, working towards this session in September, would it be a good idea? Well, I think it would be a good idea, but I'm suggesting it. Working, say, with colleges and schools and looking at how you could perhaps set up opportunities for young people who might be studying in a college, say, who might have a physical disability or a condition such as autism, to look at how potentially they could work with us in the council to look at how they could join the workforce. Because previously, having worked in that environment, I was always very concerned about the number of youngsters who had a lot to offer, who then found it very, very difficult to find employment. And I think the more that we could do to help that transition, the better, really. So it's just a suggestion that could we talk to schools and colleges about transition work?
Nods from everybody. I think you've got a big tick for that one. Thank you. Okay, we better move on to the next item, which is over to Councillor Shabir Pandor. We are just looking at your priorities for the year, what you feel that you've achieved against your priorities that you outlined to us earlier in the year, any new things that have come up, those kind of things. So just thank our other guests as they leave us. Thank you. And then hand over to Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Chair. Last 12 months I've been very, very busy, and we've done loads of stuff. And I asked officers to actually just provide me with some overview of what we've achieved. And they gave me reams and reams of paper, lists of stuff right here. So what I've done is I've actually sort of like just going to home into what I think are the key things. Around adult social care, transformation is a huge agenda. We continue to move toward integration of adult social care in NHS. And we've done some work around that, and I'm happy to take some questions around that, or actually get back to you if I don't have the answer.
Take it a bit slower for me. I'm like, adult social care transformation, is that what you're saying?
Yes. And integration of within the NHS. The other thing is, from a finance point of view, we've actually continued to balance our books, and we've managed not to tap into our reserve this year. And the savings we were planning to make, we're actually going to make them in year as the final accounts are being finalised. Children's services, I don't need to tell members that we have got huge challenges, and we are moving in the right direction. We've successfully signed the partnership agreement with Leeds City Council. At the same time, within our schools, we continue to actually make sure that we actually put in the right level of resource to make sure that our schools perform, and we actually promote good citizens for the future for our schools. Within the Economy and Place Directorate, environmental issues are critical. As local councillors, you will know that the thing that we actually get most inquiries around is our environment, roads, pavements, gritting, street scene. But at the same time, what we need to understand is we need to actually make sure that we actually develop our communities and our towns and our cities, and the growth is very, very important. At the same time, we've got a big issue around housing and housing supply. So again, housing supply and good quality homes is pretty important, a good transport infrastructure, and making sure our business thrive and we actually bring new business in, so we actually get that growth and skills agenda moving forward. And on the back of that, we actually are moving our local plan forward. At the moment, it's with the inspectors. The inspectors are due to report back any time. Touch wood, there will be minor adjustments, which will mean that we can actually continue to move forward. And hopefully, later on this year, we adopt our local plan, which will then give us the green light to actually start to develop our housing targets and our business targets. Priorities as we move on into the next financial year, quite obviously...
One at a time.
Okay, well, yeah.
Achievements, these are key
okay.
achievements from this year.
Yep, so that's a quick overview of what we've done, and I'm sure there'll be some more details that will come out from there, so I'm happy to answer questions, Chair.
So if we can just focus on those first before we look at the forward next year. So if we've got questions. Sure.
Yeah, you mentioned about the health and social care transformation. You've done some work, but needs to. We've been looking at it in Scrutiny, and I think it needs to actually move apace now. But you mentioned about you've got environmental issues, but you've also need to develop towns, and you also need to do housing, and you also need to do local plan. Well, yes, you have to do all of those. But are you saying that environmental issues are not as important as everything else? Because surely to environmental issues are important to people. And so just wanted to know why you seem to sort of say, but we need to. Just want you to clarify where you are with that, please.
We're talking about the environment.
Yeah, and also on your list of things that you were going to achieve this year, you've mentioned some, but you haven't mentioned many of them. So, for instance, on the environment, your waste management strategy, where are you with all of that as well, please?
Chair, I don't have the details of that, but what I will do is I will make sure that we get the detail around your waste management strategy. In terms of the environment, what I was saying was, as local ward councillors, as a local ward councillor myself, the key issues I face is, like any other councillor, you know, our roads, our pavements, our waste collection. That is very, very important. But at the same time, what we have to balance the books. So what we're doing, for example, with the potholing, I think we've got around 4,000 inquiries that have come through. We know exactly where the potholes are. So what we're doing, we've actually invested in new technology. So we actually get out there and actually fill the potholes. And I think from the latest email that came out to all councillors, we're actually doing 900 a week, but I can clarify that. I saw an email that went out to all councillors. But the point I'm making is that unless you have that growth, and unless you have that income stream, you're always playing catch up. So within the context of losing our budget up to the value of 60%, I'm not saying that I'm complaining, but we have to make sure that we actually deliver within our means, especially in the backdrop of our statutory responsibilities. But the waste strategy is very important, and I will actually get the details for you on that, because it's not something that I've got the detail on me at the moment.
Okay, can I just ask you about housing? You said housing needs, and we need more housing. So what progress has been made towards creating those housing?
Nationally, it is a big priority, and it's a priority for the government, and it's a priority for us as well. We quite frankly, we don't build enough houses, and that's why we have the housing crisis. And it's been something that's been on the agenda for many, many years, and I'm sure that it's going to be on the agenda for many years to come. That's why what I did was, when I went to the conference in MIPIM in France, we launched our big build, which was to build thousands of homes within the next 5 years, and 1,000 of them will be on our own land. And that is all dependent on the local plan moving forward. We are optimistic that the plan is moving forward. We want to do that. We want to do that on ourselves. That's why we've got a housing delivery company that's been formed. We're working with a number of partners. I can't share the details with you because a lot of it is commercially confidential information, but that is going on at this moment in time. And the new housing strategy will be launched very, very quickly after May, because we have given that commitment. In the next 5 years, we will develop 10,000 new homes, and that is something that we are committed to. And that is a high aspirational target, but unless you actually set a target, you don't really get anywhere, and that's what we're trying to do.
One last bit about housing is, we were developing an Excellent Homes for Life programme, so there was things imminent to be delivered around specialist housing, and what progress has been made on that?
One of the things that we're doing is we're working with our planning colleagues so that the planning process is actually hand in glove with housing development programme. And one of the things that a lot of research has been done is around how we build homes that are fit for purpose for life. So if I move in as a newly married couple, it will be meeting my needs, and then it will meet my needs for my family. When my family grow up and go to university and get married and move out, I will still be able to stay in that property, despite my elderly, me getting old and my wife getting old. So you're designing all the features from basically when a person is young to when they get elderly and frail. And that is something that, you know, is actually now getting mainstreamed into housing developers. And we are working with our planning colleagues to actually make sure that we actually deliver around the excellent Home to Life agenda.
Sorry, I meant we were looking as an authority to build social housing that suited people with difficult needs, and that was very imminent, and I just wondered if we've got sites allocated, if we've got numbers.
I will get that info. I don't have that information on me, but I will make sure if Penny can make a note of that, we will get you a briefing note on that.
Yeah, I agree that is a very important priority. One thing, partly through the housing work I've been doing through Scrutiny, but also because of things I've been doing really related to the ward, I think it is a good thing that this housing task group's been put together, that NASBARC is leading that. But I think there is still quite a bit of work to do to ensure that different sections of the council, particularly planning, are working with other groups to try and make things happen, because my personal experience with some projects being trying to progress are that there are quite a lot of blockages which make the developing of schemes quite difficult, really. So it would be good to see if that's overcome.
You've got, in your priorities for this year, you've got industrial and economic growth and skills strategy and employment and growing the local economy. So what progress has been made by the Cabinet in that respect, please?
In terms of the industrial and economic strategy, these are national strategies that have been launched by national government. And what we continue to do is work with West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Leeds City Region, and we are actually making sure that any scheme that comes through there, we are actually now starting to put the scheme in the pipeline. In terms of the skills agenda, that's pretty much Bride's area, and I know that in terms of apprenticeships and jobs, we actually are achieving what we should be achieving. We're actually achieving above the West Yorkshire average, but again, I can get figures for you around that, Chair.
So, can I just clarify then that you're acting on the government initiatives? Is that what you're saying? And apprenticeships in the council as well. But how are we as a council promoting growth in the local economy? How are we working with partners and local businesses, etc., to actually promote local growth?
Well, one of the things we've done is we've actually refreshed our Kirklees partnership, and within the Kirklees partnership we have a economy board. That board is actually in its infancy, because it's just getting to grips. We are in the process of getting the right partners around that table, and so it is something that we've actually identified as a priority, to get the key players on board and actually to work with them on board. It does take time. What I could do is next time, because the brief I was given was what are the leader and the deputy leader's priorities, and it's like, where do you start? But what might be an idea, if in future we can actually deep dive on a particular element. Is it housing? Is it skills? Is it growth? Is it inclusive strategy? Is it regional strategy? Because there's so much detail there, and it's, Chair, with the best one in the world, it's impossible for me to actually take that in my head, unless I bring loads on other paper.
Okay, maybe a bit of a miscommunication before Robin, just to clarify, is, as a scrutiny function, we cannot do everything. So we have to be careful in our priorities. So we have to prioritise. So we expect there to be some process for prioritising maybe the top 10 issues for you that you would see as things you want to drive through for a year. And that's what we were expecting feedback on. What you said was most important to you earlier in the year, that's what we wanted feedback on. So it's a flow. But yeah, we'll clarify that for when you come back in the new municipal year. When we come back, though, I've banned verbal reports from all the officers, so it'd be nice as well that we're setting a good example, that we have written reports as these are my key priorities, this is what I hope to achieve this year, and then it makes it easier for everyone. Is that right? So can I just bring Rob in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for next year, we've already had some discussion about what should be the key priorities for the Economy and Neighbourhoods panel. And we've highlighted that we need to look at the skills strategy because we were going to do it this last year, and because it was undergoing a bit of a rewrite, that didn't happen. And I think with the economic strategy, it's pulling everything together really. That we've done work on things like social value, on inclusive growth, on working more closely with the business community. All that needs pulling together. So I think we both need to be very focused on the areas that we're looking at, but we also need to look at the linkages between things. So for example, housing and transport has got massive implications for things like the skills strategy and the growth strategy. So we've got to explore those and try to ensure that that linkage is taking place within the activities of the council.
I saw those in your agenda so I think it's great you've got them on your plan for next year. Really good. Okay, is there anything more on last year's? No, I don't think we've got to go into next year's priorities because really it's about the feedback and what we've achieved. But we would like you to come back early in the new municipal year with a list of the top 10 priorities you want to drive forward in for the next municipal year. Is that okay? Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, and we'll have a written brief that we can debate, and then and Penny will liaise with you on the dates. We're going to set the dates at the end of this meeting, so we'll be able to let you have them very quickly.
What might be an idea, Chair, is if we can get together with Penny, so outside this meeting, and then we just agree something, and then we can get back again.
Okay, that's right. So thank you very much for your time. Yeah, you've been with us a lot today, so thank you. We've just got a couple of more items for us as a panel to go through. So, right, we have our lead member reports, and the first one on my list is Liz. Over to you.
Thank you. Yes, this is the end of yearly member report. There's just a couple of examples of the work that we've done. There's an update on the latest meetings and a couple of examples of the work we've done during the year. If we'd put everything down, it would have gone on for quite a number of pages because we have had a busy year in health and social care scrutiny. So one of the areas we looked at was specialist wheelchair services, and we're looking to have an update on progress of our recommendations and upcare to come in. Another area is podiatry services. We've commented on the consultation and recommendations on that. We also did work around the health optimisation programme, and the CCG subsequently changed their approach to that. So we'll be looking next year to actually having the panel looked at the agenda for possibly next year, and we were looking to have an update on how the outcomes of what the CCG agreed in the end to undertake. We also, obviously, in health scrutiny, have the joint panels as well. So the joint health overview and scrutiny panel for Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust changes, that did an awful lot of work during the year, and we await a reply to our referral on that. And also the West Yorkshire panel, there's a lot of work to be done in relation to the STP and the West Yorkshire strands of work on that. And I end the report by thanking everybody who's been involved in all of those panels, because it has been a lot of work this year and is likely to be a lot of work next year, as there is a lot of areas that we need to look at coming up. And also to thank scrutiny officers as well, because you know, the amount of work has been quite extraordinary. Thank you.
Yeah, it was nice to see such constructive input from so many of your panel. It was really good. And do appreciate what the pressure's under, because there is so much change within social care and health at the moment. Everybody's under huge amounts of pressure. So I think it's been an excellent job. Rob, is there anything you want to ask about Lizzie's report? No. No. Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Liz. Rob, over to you with your report.
Like Liz, there's a whole very long list of things potentially I could cover, so I'll try and keep it fairly brief. This has been a new panel, and I hope that it's worked effectively. We've focused on two main areas, which have been housing and transport, and we've really tried to get into these areas in depth. We've had some very useful presentations from officers, which have been followed up by some fairly searching discussions and question sessions, and I've also been very pleased how issues that have been raised in those discussions have been followed up afterwards to give greater detail that we've been then able to share with members of the panel. At the last meeting in March, 15th of March, we focused on homelessness and rough sleeping. And that was a sort of spin-off that came up from the work that we've been doing on housing, but it was also about the concerns around December, January with the bad weather in terms of what was happening in terms of provision for the homeless. So again, we had a very interesting paper presented by officers, which we agreed that we would share more widely with councillors to ensure that people were better informed with what was happening. Another thing that came from that was information about a group that was working from the third sector, where different community groups were looking at the homelessness issue. And what we're going to do is to progress that and pull together information about the work that they've been undertaking to also share that with other councillors. So that is something that's going to be happening in May. We also have done some work. We set up a group to look at some of the issues in more detail. So we looked at the issue of housing allocation. So we met with senior officers and with the cabinet members to have a look at that in some detail, which was quite a lengthy and searching discussion. And I think the officers and cabinet members felt that some good things were raised there, which can feed into the process of the review of housing allocation. We did feel, in terms of with the work that we've been doing on housing, because this new task group has been set up, that there was a great danger of us replicating work that that group was doing. So the intention is to try and work more closely with that group, rather than having separate sessions really to look at things, which we will progress into next year. Transport things. At the last meeting, we had a presentation from Network Rail. The chap called Kieran Duncan, who's actually the project manager for the Transpennine upgrade, came along with two other senior managers, and we had a very lengthy, it was over an hour and a half presentation and discussion around the implications of the Transpennine upgrade for Kirklees. And what came out of that is that we, as an authority, are probably likely to be more affected by this than any other authority within West Yorkshire. So there's some really important considerations which I think we'll need to look at in the future. And I think it's very important that the follow-up work makes sure that we maximise the potential benefits from the work that's happening. Final thing really is just looking at the things that we've already begun to discuss in terms of priorities for next year. So we've had meetings both with cabinet members and senior officers. So the housing work we wish to continue with, the work on allocations policy, really quite a lot of that's already been done. We need to do a little bit more work on reporting back on that. but we also want to look at what's happening in terms of the new housing strategy, the kind of things you were alluding to earlier. How is this actually going to happen? What is going to be achieved? There's the issue of towns and communities in Kirklees, which was on the agenda for this year. We didn't actually get round to looking at that, but I think it's important that we do so next year. Waste minimisation strategy, already come up in the meeting today. I think, again, that's very important that we're involved with that. Earlier on this week, I was involved in a meeting with several community groups around the issues of waste minimisation and recycling. And one thing that I'm keen to explore next year is that we get more stakeholders involved in the discussions about how policy is developing within Kirklees. I think that's extremely important. Skills strategy we've mentioned earlier on in this meeting. I think that's very, very important. And I think it's vital that we link it up with things like the transport developments, the housing developments, to look at what the skill needs are going to be for the future, but also to explore the actual mechanics of how this is going to happen. How are we going to encourage more young people to engage and access job opportunities in those kind of areas? And then the final thing really is about the work on the new economic strategy. And again, it's ensuring that things that are happening, the work that's been undertaken by people like David Bundy on social value and sustainable growth within West Yorkshire, how that is really seriously embedded within the economic strategy. Yeah, so that's it. And again, I would really like to thank the people who've taken part in the panel, the members and the co-optee, who played a really excellent role in some very constructive and interesting discussions. And again, I would like to thank the officers who've supported this work. They've done a great job and made my job a lot easier.
It was nice to sit in your panel and see such positive feedback from the members of your panel. It was really good. And I really like the items you've got on your list, those 5 items for new municipal year. I think they're spot on, the right issues to be looking at. And also, I was concerned that you lost one of your co-optees throughout the year. So I've been just talking to Penny about it, and we're going to try and find somebody to fill that gap for you in the new municipal year as well. Yeah.
That is something I really would like to discuss with you, because I think they can add a lot of value to the discussions. And looking at the work of your panel, I think you've got some really strong people with a lot of expertise and interest in the area who contribute a lot. I think we need that really, and especially the kind of issue you raised earlier about the connection with the business community and ensuring that they're feeding into what's happening in terms of developing the economic strategy. I think that's absolutely vital. So I think it's both the co-optees, but also looking at how we can bring in other groups and invite them along to meetings and look at ways in which we can involve them in the discussion and questioning that's taking place.
In addition to sort of co-optee, it's quite appropriate to invite in external expertise. So Chamber of Commerce, the college, and how their skills strategy complements. So, yeah, I think it's good to use lots of people, lots of organisations, and appropriate skills and knowledge. Yeah, so, okay, that's great. Move on. Councillor Burke can't be here, but is there anybody got any comments on Councillor Burke's report? My only comment is. No, I've got 2 comments. So if we note them, then I'll remember to share them with him. Educare, my understanding was that Educare should stop children going into care. So that children in residential homes, that if we're doing Educare properly, they shouldn't reach residential homes, because the whole aim of it is to prevent children going into the care system. So maybe we need to review that. So I'm hoping to talk to him about that. And I would also, in the new municipal year, if they could follow up on the ad hoc panel's recommendations, which I know will merge with the Ofsted recommendations, and it would be nice to see what progress has been made between then and now and get a clip, because I think it would be interesting to show the difference between then and now. Councillor Golfam Asif couldn't be here. today. He's looking ahead. He's done a bit of work on the transformation programme and access to services since the last meeting. And he says, looking forward, he wants to be looking at follow-ups on the Democracy Commission, Financial Monitoring and Transformation Programme. But I think we need to have a review of the corporate plan, because the Transformation Programme as a whole and the Democracy Commission stuff should be on the Management Committee agenda. So I think there's risk of duplication there. What I would like him to be looking at in the new municipal year is just the procurement element of the transformation programme, commercialisation. I think budget assumptions would be interesting to look at, because that was picked up through corporate governance and audit, that we haven't reviewed the assumptions that frame the budget, and so budget assumptions would be good. And there was one other thing. And oh yes, there's a street lighting programme, an investor safe programme. It would be good to see if that's on track, and if it's achieving its if you're getting the street lights in place at the right in the timetable set, and if it's achieving its savings, so that'd be interesting. So they're the things I'd like them to be looking at next year as a priority. So onto my report. It's a very brief one. Says highlights corporate governance and audit. They agreed the call-in process. We did amend the officer's recommendations, which is as we discussed. So we're not expecting everyone to automatically demonstrate that they've done. They've taken lots of steps to resolve their concerns, because it's not always possible, but it's just nice to do if you can. Had a chat with Chief Exec. We had a regular briefing with the Chief Exec and Legal Officer. The leader of the council joins in those now, which is really helpful. One of the things she was concerned about was she couldn't see the forward work programme, but we just say, well, it's just because we haven't set dates and we haven't done it, but there is a lot of rolling programme of issues, so we want to share that with them as early as possible in the new municipal year. But the most important, I think, meeting with Mike Henry and Rachel Spencer Henshaw was really good to discuss performance information more. What we'd like is, if we've got a list, we've already got a list now of the things we'd like to be looking at in the new municipal year, if the Scrutiny support officers could liaise with you over a little bit of focus around those, so we know we've got yours already set up for health, but maybe with your issues around housing, town centres, just the areas of focus under each of those headings. If they could work with that, we can share that with them early on. So then, once in your first panel meeting of the new municipal year, you can agree your work programme. You could probably have some background information already there to help inform that. In the second meeting of your municipal year, Mike Henry can attend and go through whatever data and intelligence he can find from different sources to support that work. Does that work for you?
Yes, I think that would be really useful, because I think if you've got it focused on the particular issue that you are looking at, it's a more manageable task to really scrutinise that in more detail. I'm not sure that our scrutiny of the whole set of data has been particularly effective, because I think there's just too much of it, really.
I was frustrated because I was looking at how the council has made progress overall in its performance management, performance management evaluation and new processes, and it's been slow because we've not had the capacity at a senior level. Now we've got somebody in post very new that is committed to driving that forward. I'm going to be picking that up with them and one-to-one to see how he progresses that. I'll bring that back to you if I think it needs further attention. But in the short term, I think if there are particular issues, it is easier to challenge the way things are done, but also as a learning curve for members to understand the raft of data that's out there, which we probably don't even know about half of it. So it'd be really interesting. Okay, so that was one. Then I also did a present to CMG, which I was really enjoyed and had great response from it. What I've got here for you, which I'll give you copies of, is the slides that Penny put together. We can hand it to you, and we can hand it out now. Slides that Penny put together for me. My notes, which is pretty much what I said for each slide. And then these handouts, which we were left with them all. So copies of each of that, and we'll get them in the internal post to Carl and Gelfam. But you can see what I said to them, which went down very well. The next day we had positive feedback and requests for scrutiny to help with stuff the next day, which is really good. I was asked for if I could just pick out 3 priorities from following the meeting, what I'd like. I just chose 2, which was think about scrutiny very early on and how scrutiny can contribute to what you're looking at. Boost pre-scrutiny work and trust us with information. So I want that message going out to everybody about trust. I've asked them to trust us, to be professional. So if there is things which are private and confidential, which should be rare, most stuff should be open and in the public domain, but every now and then there is something that affects an individual or private finance, which is not something we're allowed to make public, then we can be trusted to treat that appropriately. That message has been reinforced by the Chief Exec as well, and we had really nice feedback from everybody in the room. There was a really particular message about a visit Carl did recently to a children's home, and how much the staff enjoyed that visit, and they found it really helpful. They was really motivated by it. There was a challenge on the work of health, because we're talking about how we want to be constructive and help, and at the moment I was referring to health being between a rock and a hard place, and apparently we're reviewed as a rock at the minute. But that's just a set of circumstances, and it isn't meant to be that we don't want to work with them. We want to be constructive and help, but with the challenges they're under and that balance of meeting the needs of the public, looking at the evidence and everything, it's a tough place for them at the moment. But there was an acceptance that's it is all done with the best intentions. What else? There was what was nice is the day after we had a message through where an issue's been referred to Children's Panel, one they've wanted to look at for some months. The paperwork to support that went out the next day, and with a request for them to be involved. So I'm hoping that the message has got through now. Thing is, I've said to them with this, and don't let me down on it, the list of principles, what is scrutiny, what we expect from panel members, that we share this with people at the beginning of the municipal year, which we did last year. I want to make sure first panel meeting, everybody on the panel, whether they've done scrutiny before or not, gets a copy of this, so just a refresher of what is the standards that we expect. Is that okay? You happy? Yeah, good, let's see. You are. It's a good place to be, being a rock. In some cases it is. So I'm hoping it's gone a long way, I think, to help build that relationship. And the message was supported by the Chief Exec that we draw a line under any apprehension we've had, any issues we've had in the past. We draw a line on that and move forward. There was concern that maybe raised by the officers that they've probably been a bit too controlling, as they've had bad experience in the past where private information has been set into the public domain. I think that happened only once or twice in the last 10 years. So they know that's not their role, and they need to be open, and they get that now. So that should be good. I'm chuffed about it.
Okay. It's important that people talk to scrutiny as early as possible, so that we can plan for them to come and see us in our panels. but also that they feel that they can have those early discussions with us, and we can give some input at an early stage. I think that's important, yeah.
It is, and it was my top two priorities was early involvement, think about scrutiny from concept, from initial concerns, right through to decision, and also open and trusting. Yes, I totally agree. Just thought something else to share with you. It's gone out my head. Yeah, forward planning. Oh, the other thing is I've put a complete ban on verbal reports and PowerPoint presentations. So you should have written information for every item that comes to your panel. And that might not always happen with the health services because we can't impose that in the same way. But we can try to push that message out there. Just as I was going to say, if Kirklees council officers are not allowed, partners probably shouldn't be allowed. So we can try and get that message out to them as well. Okay. Yeah.
One little bit of feedback was that it might be that people do a report, so there's something for members to prepare for, but actually use a presentation to facilitate the discussion at the meeting. Is that acceptable, Chair?
What I don't want is an outline cover for a presentation and then all the meat in a PowerPoint presentation. Because if there's last-minute statistics or last-minute updates which cannot physically go into the report, then that's acceptable. But predominantly I want the bulk of the information in the written reports. Well.
Yeah. Following on from what you've said, Penny, I think with the work of the panel this year, the presentations have been very useful, really. I think they've just helped to communicate the points that the officers are making. I think you do need the written material to support that. And with the presentations, what I've tended to do is that before the presentation has taken place, I've had a pre-meeting with the officers to look at what they were intending to put into the presentation to ensure that it's covering all the areas that I felt were important that we needed to scrutinise, really. And they have responded to that. And in most occasions, they have added things and amended the presentations. I think without those presentations, that would diminish, really, the effectiveness of what we're doing.
Can I say, if you might have had that discussion, but have the rest of your panel had that discussion, what information do the rest of your panel get and what time do they have to digest the information before you debate it? Because I want our meetings to be really focused and achieve outcomes and drive things forward. So I don't want to be things to drag on and on and on. Liz?
I think we prefer a lot of time to ask questions, have the information ahead of time, because sometimes as well you need, certainly in the health and social care, sometimes you need to do some background reading as well. So reports can refer to other reports, and if you sometimes need to look at those as well. But I think we need to have plenty of time for questions, and from that we can look at what recommendations we want to put forward and what outcomes we'd like from the discussions. Yeah.
And all meetings, you are time limited in a lot of cases, so if you spend half of it just looking at a presentation, you don't have the opportunity to challenge that information and digest it. And yeah, so yes, there's some. I know, like some of the Network Rail stuff when they came, that was brilliant. That was, but you still had some written information, but it was. That's work in progress. That's just opening up debate, really. So you'll have to come back to that. So it's a long-term piece of work. But in the most part, I would like to see all the information that is available come to you early so you've got time to digest it. Because and for all of your panel as well, I don't want any grey areas. That's what I'm thinking. I don't want grey areas. And I don't want to say you can have a report and a presentation, because I would have that as the exception rather than the rule, because I want everybody getting to the point that they can do a cover, say we are going to discuss this, this, this and that without any meat to it. I want to have the meat of it in the report. Okay.
Yeah, I guess one thing we will need to work on is the timing of things, because sometimes with some of the issues that we've been looking at, the officer's work has only been probably concluded a few days before the actual meeting, which is not their fault. I think it's the amount of lead time that we're giving them. So that is one thing that I will consider if I'm in this role next year, giving them more time so that they can prepare things and get it out to members of the panel well in advance of the meeting. Because I do agree that it is really important that you're able to read things before you come to the meeting and think about the kind of questions you're going to ask. Yeah.
I do hope you're in this position next year. And I think it's now, because it was new to you this year, and it's new for Golfam as well this year, and Carl's kind of just getting back into it. So it's been a tough learning curve, I think, this year, and you've had the opportunity now to get your head around it, and you can plan. You've already got a list for next year of what you want to look at, so we can make a head start. And I'm hoping we can start very early in the municipal year. And if by the end of this month we've got some idea of the focus underneath the headings of each of the things you want to look at, we can start to prompt the officers and give them some time to put some information together for you.
Yeah. The only difficulty with that can come if something arises out of a meeting where members of the panel feel that they would like to get into something in a little more depth. So for an example of that would be the homelessness work, because that really came out of the previous meeting. So it did mean that the officers had to put a presentation together pretty quickly, really, because of the length of time between the two meetings. So I guess we still have to have a little bit of flexibility within.
Flexibility is good because we never know what's around the corner, and we need to be able to respond to that. But in the most part, you should have plenty of notice to be able to present the right information to you and have the right information officers there to support that. Okay. That's it. The last item on the agenda is dates for next year. So we're going to run these past you and see if they work for you. Because we would like to get a really early start in the new municipal year. So from a management committee point of view, because they want to put it on the programme for annual council. How do these dates work? We're looking at Friday the 15th of June for the first meeting. Got 7 dates for you. You're right. Friday the 15th of June, Monday the 16th of July. They're all Mondays after that. The 3rd of September, 5th of November, 5th of November. Yeah. Nice. 7th of January, but that will also include the co-op tea gathering, and there might be, we're hoping to start the recruitment process for the 2019-20 co-op teas during that year. So by January, we'll know if there's any co-op teas that will be retiring at the end of the year, so we'll be able to give them a thank you card. And Monday the 4th of March, and then for an end of year catch up, Monday the 15th of April. Okay. If you get a chance to have a look at those now, if the earlier you can let Penny know if there's going to be any conflicts with any of those, that'd be great. The June one is we just can't do between me, my holidays, Penny's holidays and everything. We were juggling dates. So that seems to be the best, earliest opportunity for us to get together.
I'll email them to everybody and get immediate comments.
Okay. I think that's end of the session today. Thank you very much for your time and commitment.